Hi everyone and welcome to this episode of Adobe Live. In this one we were joined by photographer and retoucher Nicole Cooper. What did we cover?
We covered tone and texture and retouching an image, but trying to make it look like you haven't touched it at all.
Lots of great tips in this one. Hope you enjoy. Hi everyone and welcome to this episode of Adobe Live. I'm Flynn and I'm joined by Nicole Cooper. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm really good. Photographer, retoucher.
Yes, photographer, retoucher.
Traveller. Yes,
global traveller.
Yep.
I've been a photographer for 9 years, retoucher for about 6. I've been all over the globe working for a myriad of clients ranging from Microsoft all the way through to fashion, and that's primarily what I do, and that's kind of what you'll see a little bit of today as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect. And welcome everybody out there. If you'd like to join in and ask Nicole any questions during this session, this retouching session, please do. So you can log in using your Creative Cloud ID, just your normal Adobe ID in the top right-hand corner, and you can jump in and ask questions as we go. Let us know if you're in the chat, and we'd like to hear from you.
Yes. Hey, New Zealand.
Hey, chat. Festus, yes.
Hey, yeah.
We missed you last week, dude. It's good to have you back. Genuinely missed you, so we're glad to see you there. And yeah, we were actually talking about you before the show.
I saw that, yeah. I watched that live as well, and you said he was a regular and you were concerned that for his safety.
It's like an internet friend that,
that you've never met.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got heaps.
I know.
Yeah, you got friends on like Instagram and whatnot that you're just like, you fully feel connected to their life.
And if something ever happens, there's no other, anyway, it's great to see. That's our way of saying that. So maybe we could have a little bit of a chat about what we're actually going to do today.
Yes.
Because, photographer, obviously, and retoucher. So a big part of what you're doing is obviously retouching photos for print and web and campaigns all around fashion.
Yeah, primarily fashion.
Primarily fashion.
It is obviously a massive part in the actual imagery itself. So everyone always forgets. They always just think, oh, you're a photographer, you take photos. But there's the post-processing. And I think this is the part that I relish the most because it means that I get a lot more, I have like a really good chance to manipulate the image as well.
Right.
So retouching for me is like almost cathartic. I can spend hours doing it. For the sake of today, we're not going to be here for hours because I'm sure people have other things to do. But what I'm going to try and explain today and actually get into is my retouching process and how to actually work on the tone and the texture of an image. So in this instance, I'll be working on a beauty image, and I want to try and keep the integrity of her skin and all of the pores and everything that actually exists on her face, but highlight certain areas and detract from certain areas to ensure that you get the actual essence of the image. Oh, cool. So yeah,
I like that. I love the way you talk about that.
Well, it's something I'm really passionate about because most people, it's still great. Some people love the idea of being able to take an image and not even need to edit it, and that's totally fine. I'm on board with that too. But a lot of people forget that it can be such a massive part, and sometimes clients will look at an image and like, it's not done yet, like let me retouch it, because it will look entirely different. Like if you allow me to spend the time on it, then you've got the ability to go further. So I'll be using a bunch of different layers and working as well with adjustment layers as well today, and kind of showing a bit of colour and sort of exposure manipulation as well. But really the focus is tone and texture and just keeping the image looking as good as it should.
Cool.
Without looking almost like you've touched it.
Right.
Yeah.
Retouching without touch.
Yeah. The idea is to kind of make it look like you haven't gone overboard.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I like it.
We'll see at the end of the hour. I may have just gone crazy.
How did you choose the image that we're going to use today? Because we were chatting a little bit in the lead up, and obviously you have so many images to choose from.
Yeah, I do. Well, this one was actually only shot, I should know. I think it was only 2 weeks ago.
Right.
This is just an image that I wanted to shoot a bunch of images for myself. It was with a makeup artist that I've been working with quite a fair bit, Maya Yui, who's the cutest little thing ever.
Shout out.
Shout out to Maya. I hope you end up watching this. Anyway, it was a job that I did with her where we just wanted to shoot some really beautiful women and kind of play with makeup. So it was something that I organised very last minute in a big week of multiple campaigns, and I just kind of like ran right out the door. It's not an image that you would necessarily look at and think it's a beauty image, in that I didn't use what most people would consider to be the correct tools. So I used sort of the wrong camera, the wrong lens, that sort of thing.
Right.
And I've decided to still go with it because I just think it's such a beautiful image. But it also shows that you don't necessarily need to have what most people consider to be the correct equipment in order to actually shoot what you want to shoot.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I like it.
Cool.
Excellent choice.
India.
Yeah. Hey, chat. Claire from Sydney. That's my wife. Hi.
Hi.
Hey, everyone. Perth, Peter, Melbourne.
Perth. Oh, I was just in
India.
Perth not that long ago.
Very cool. Great to have you. Anyone from Bali in the chat?
Yeah, where are my Bali people? I mean,
cool.
they're 2 hours behind, so they're probably all still asleep.
Right.
It's midday. No one gets up before midday in Bali.
That sounds pretty good. We'll talk a bit about that, I think, as we go through.
Yeah.
But do we want to get stuck in to the creation, the editing of this image?
Cool. Yeah, because as I said, tends to take a little while.
Sure.
So...
Don't forget, guys, if you have questions, feel free to ask as we go through.
Yeah.
I've been told Nicole can work and talk.
Yeah, I'm very good at talking. Very, very good.
She's always really useful for Adobe Live.
Yes.
So feel free to ask your questions, or I'm just going to ask my silly questions.
Yeah. So everything that I shoot will always be raw. If it's digital, I'll always shoot a raw file, just because it means they'll be able to manipulate the image properly in post. So
we're in Camera Raw
yes,
at the
we're
moment?
in Camera Raw,
Yep.
which is a plugin of Photoshop itself. So I primarily work in Photoshop. I make my selects in Bridge, and then I go from there and just open it straight up into Camera Raw. So in Camera Raw, I've actually messed around with this image already a little bit, so I'm just going to bring it back to default, pretend I didn't do that. What I'll do is I'll always keep it in colour, because it's actually a lot easier to retouch in colour. With black and white, you lose some of the actual tone in the image when you do convert, and it's a bit harder to differentiate and pick clean source points from a black and white image. I'll get into source points a little bit later, so that makes a bit more sense, but I always work in colour, and if I do want to eventually turn it into a black and white image, I do that in Photoshop itself, and I'll do that as an adjustment layer. So I'll play with the colour of the image. I'm really enjoying the warmth of this image, so I really don't necessarily want to change it all that much. But I'll come through and just mess with the exposure a little bit. So in this instance, I'm literally just going to lift it the tiniest, because I want to be able to see into the shadows there, and I want to be able to retouch in the shadows.
I'm going to ask my first question, because we did this before. You just did it seems silly. I feel like I should have known this, especially, working for Adobe and everything like that. But your quick little shortcut to bump it up a value?
Yes, so I shift and up or down. So I can go, well, if it's in RAW, it's shift and it goes up like 0.5.
Yep.
And in other aspects, what did I do it in before?
I think we're in Photoshop.
We were in Photoshop. It was an adjustment layer. And I messed with something, and it went up just one value.
I'd be curious if chat actually knew about that. You're all probably going to go, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's like day one design school. But I genuinely did not know that. So I thought it was
I'm glad I got to teach you something. Yeah. At least I taught someone something today.
Oh, it's not a live stream if I don't learn a whole bunch of new things.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Shout out to Newcastle, and Jackie's going to Bali next week, so maybe you can give us some tips in a little bit.
Sweet. Cool.
Yeah.
Yep. Just DM me on Instagram, which is @by Nicole Cooper. That's a nice plug there. Cool. So I'll generally leave the contrast just because I'm going to mess with that later, but I'll come down to the highlights, and I tend to pull those down just a touch, because not everyone exposes their images perfectly in, the camera itself. That's always the best part about shooting RAW. You can mess with it afterwards. I love to pull up the whites a little bit, just because you can see in the highlight on her cheek there, I'm just lifting it ever so slightly, so you can kind of see the difference of me pulling the whites up. You can see it in the gloss on Diana's lips as well. She's got like a beautiful gloss there, thanks to Maya. And I'll also lift the blacks ever so slightly here, just because I want to still be able to come into here and actually retouch this area properly and clean it up.
So you're looking at certain points when you're doing those edits. So you're looking at the highlight of the lips and the shadows and everything
definitely.
like that.
Even though this isn't going to be the final image itself, I'm actually just going to, there we go, pull that down further. Even though this isn't going to be what the final colour and actual exposure of the image will be, I try and set it up so that it's easy to retouch.
Right.
So I get it close to what I want it to look like, so that at the end it's only a couple of little tweaks and, adjustments. But I also try to make sure that I'm not, completely making it hard for myself. Like I'm not getting it to the final thing and then I'm like, can't see what I'm retouching, can't see in the shadows, can't see this.
Right.
Another thing that I do, this is normally unticked. So I would normally come in and I would enable profile corrections. You can see what I shot it on, which is not a standard lens for beauty. I shot with a Sigma 35 Art, the f1.4. 35mm is quite distorted. So I'm just going to adjust. So you can see here, I'm going to do it very slowly. If you watch the top of her head, I'm going to pull the distortion back and all the way back up and then back again. So you can see that it pulls sort of anything that sits near the actual edges of the frame, it pulls it forward so that it actually brings the distortion back. Also, 35mm is great for shooting full length. So it makes people look taller if you kind of drop below the subject a little bit and you angle it up.
Oh, right.
The actual distortion creates a really like long person within the image.
Oh, that's a good tip for me.
Yeah, if you want to look, well, also same deal with iPhone photography.
Right.
And you can also deal with the vignetting here. So it always has a little bit of a vignetting in the lens itself. So I'm just going to pull it up a little bit just because I don't want the edges to be too dark. There's a lot more that you can do in Camera Raw, but for the sake of today in time, I'm just going to go straight into it.
Cool.
So first thing that I do once I'm in Photoshop is I duplicate my layers. I'm going to do that twice. And what you should always do, but not everyone does, name your layers.
Are you sometimes one of those everyone's?
Always. I never name. I'm the worst. I'm always like, I'm totally going to like name the layers, and then I never do.
Yeah, every artist we have on here is, I think, feels the pressure.
Do people do it?
Yeah, they do. They do. We've had some very honest people on, such as yourself, that have said, "Hey, I definitely should be naming my layers as I'm demoing how to do this, but just on the sly,
it's difficult. It takes up time. You just so I've just renamed these 2 layers. So it's my skin tone, not multiple, skin tone and texture. So with the skin tone layer just here, this is a form of retouching that's called frequency separation. And all it does is it allows me to work on the low frequency, which is the tones in the image. So like these little highlights here and all through here. It's essentially the painting part of the image.
Right.
It's the part that I get to paint on someone's face ever so slightly. And then the texture actually keeps the integrity of the texture. So if I do an example here, I'm going to go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm just going to quickly click on here. You can see it's quite blurry in there. And the idea is that you want it so that the actual colours tend to bleed into themselves a little bit more. So I've got a radius of 6. I might bump it up to 7. And you can see that it's looking quite soft.
Right.
So that's essentially so that I can quite easily blend in those colours and actually paint it in a little bit nicer. A little bit nicer? Very articulate today. Then I'm going to pull on my texture layer, and to do that and create that layer, you go to Apply Image. I'm going to click on the skin tone and I'm going to invert the skin tone. This is where people tend to get a bit confused. You can always YouTube this.
Right.
So the actual details, this part tends to, confuse a lot of people.
Right. People are YouTubing this right now.
People YouTube, yeah, exactly. There you go. And then you want to add the layer. Scale should be set at 2, offset at 1. And you can see, if I zoom in here, it currently just looks like a big grey thing.
Right.
But you can actually see the texture. And that's what we'll be working on. So I'm going to click OK. And now to get it back to what it should be looking like, I'm going to set my actual layer adjustment there, layer adjustment, layer...
Adjustment layer?
Well, no, it's not adjustment layer. What's this? The layer type, the layer... I don't know what the word for this is. I should. Anyway, I'm setting it from what would be normal to linear light.
Right.
And then this just means that, say, if I turn off those 2 layers, it still looks like so, but it's created more texture. So if I turn off the skin tone layer, you can see the texture. From here, this is where I normally would start painting in. And this is where you get to kind of like pull on the highlights and really emphasize them, and then also even out the skin tone in general. Different lighting can create different skin tones.
Right.
So this is where I'll start actually painting, which I will do. So to do so, sometimes I even turn off the texture layer, which I don't think many people do.
Yeah.
Layer mode. Thank you, Jackie. That's what I'm talking about.
Jackie, thank
She's
you.
all over it. So to do so, I'm going to switch to my brush tool. I always have the hardness pulled all the way down. I want it to be like a soft brush, an actual brush, as if you're airbrushing someone's skin, which you can do in makeup. And I'll also pull the flow of it all the way down. I would normally keep it around like 3 to 6%, but that's because I build and I build and I build when I actually do the retouching. And for today, we have an hour. So I'm just going to do
It's a tight timeline, isn't it?
I was going to do it real fast. She's going to look like that episode of The Simpsons where he has the makeup gun.
Oh, it just
shoots her. It's going to look like this at the end, I'm sure of it. So
if we could just do the rest of the next 47 minutes in Simpsons references and quotes, that'll be
beautiful. I've seen way too much of it. It was never allowed when I was younger.
Oh, is that not a recipe for binge watching something?
Oh,
if you weren't allowed to watch
if you're not allowed to watch it. So just to give you a quick talk through what I'm doing right now, because this part you can just watch me do this and we can chat about other stuff. But I'm switching between my brush, which is currently set at 9, and I click what I call a clean source point. I pull on an area where a colour is, where I want to sort of draw on that colour and then continue painting that area in that colour. So I'm trying to paint sort of larger areas in the same colour to kind of just like bring it all back in. So sometimes in an actual highlight like this, I will use Alt to select and then I'll do this and actually click on it. And this is now the colour that I've selected.
Right.
Sometimes I actually bring up the colour a little bit and I'll actually paint it so it's a little bit brighter and it kind of brings out more in the highlight, and also just like say where all these natural highlights are sitting, I'll actually paint it a bit brighter, because then in here, if I switch between and I turn off those other 2 layers, you can already see that I'm creating a highlight where a highlight kind of didn't exist. So I'm going to keep on painting on the skin tone. And probably just chatting away. I also sometimes, forgot to say, I also sometimes start healing in the actual skin tone layer. I normally would only use the healing in the texture layer,
right?
Because that's where I start pulling out all of the sort of like little imperfections. But occasionally, if it's a bit of an easy, like if it's an area that really looks, you can see just like here, for example, there's a bit of a darker spot. So I'll actually heal in the actual tone layer as well. So I'm just going to go to town. I'll switch between the brush mode and the actual healing. But yeah, it's not a fast process.
You are very fast though.
Oh yeah.
Moving around.
When you get it, you tend to get a little bit of an eye for certain areas, and you'll know. So I'm currently using, I never know the name of it. It's like the lasso. Oh, it's the patch tool. I used to.
We've got Chat just to correct us.
Yeah,
anyway.
thanks. These guys are all over it.
Chat is always all over it.
Tuned in.
As
hey,
well.
Al. She made me pancakes this morning.
Hey, Al.
I spilt syrup all over this laptop. So, you know, it's a hardy laptop. It's been through a lot and it's still going. It's a good one.
What device are you using?
This is the Microsoft Surface Book 2, and it has so much grunt that it's not even funny. This thing, like, I used to be an Apple user, and then I switched. I used to be, actually, prior to that, a Microsoft user. Used to, like, you know, have Windows and back in the day when the computer was set up in our garage, and
the family
computer. Oh yeah, with zero grunt, because it was like, you know, the lowest of the lows in terms of, you know, actual computers, and then switched to Apple, and then had the opportunity after a few years to come to one of these, and I've not looked back. Like, I even joke because I still have the old Apple. And it gets used for Netflix, and sometimes not even that.
Right.
Like, it'll sit, it's my second screen, so like it'll just sit over there and I'll just be like, sorry, Apple. I'll just be using this bad boy because it has a touch screen, means that I don't have to carry around a Wacom anymore, and it just means less moving parts for me. It's all built in. And it also just works in Photoshop a lot faster. There are some elements in Photoshop that take ages to process. For example, one of those being like Smart Sharpen. And it normally would just sit on your screen and you just watch the little, like, what I used to call the rainbow wheel of death, but you'd just watch it like spinning. You'd be like, oh, it's not going to work. So at least with this guy, it's got so much in it that I just, it's a lot faster, more efficient for me. And it means that I can also, like, give this to an assistant who's never used a Wacom and know that they'll be able to use it
Right.
Because you know how Wacom is a lot. It's like watching Bambi try and like walk for the first time. People with a Wacom are like, how does this work? When in reality, it's a large trackpad, but it doesn't make sense. So, yeah, it just means I can sort of pass this off to someone else and be like, okay, have fun with it now.
And you travel a lot and
Yes.
work as you travel all the time.
Yes, I
And
do.
is this what you primarily work
Oh, yeah,
on the road?
100%. Yeah, this
Pretty
is
cool.
my travel computer. This is my like stock standard. I do also have a big Studio 2. Not so easy to travel with,
Right.
but it looks really impressive when clients, you pull that out in front of clients and they're like, oh, wow, she must be a big deal.
We used one here in the studio a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago with Jezri. So he had that out,
Yeah.
painting with it, having a good time, doing a bit of illustration.
Yeah, okay, nice.
Had a good time.
All right, so I've just turned back on my texture layer so I can actually see how far I've gone with it. And you can see already that I've painted in just a little bit, particularly around in this area. Now, this is still actually too bright and too hectic, but I'm going to come back to that. And that's the good thing about Photoshop. You can always come back. You can either mask areas out that you've gone way too far on, or you can always just drop back on the fill. And
Well,
you can
that's
be
an
like,
important point. As long as your process is non-destructive,
yes.
that's the most
And
important
that's the best thing about layers. And naming them correctly, because you know which layer you've just
What are
been
layers
working
again?
on. Yeah, I did have a friend ask that once. It was third year of university. We were about to graduate in about 6 months. And we were in technical class and we weren't doing anything hectic. I think we were just doing a little bit of manipulation. And she just, our lecturer was like, all right, guys, duplicate your layer. We're just going to work off a new fresh one because you always want to make sure you work off a fresh one. And she just turned to me and she went, what's the layer again?
That's great.
I was like, mate, we're about to 6 months out of graduation. We've been doing it for 2.5 years. It's not a cheap course.
I love it.
Like SCA is a good course, but it's not cheap. So yeah, that was a good time. But layers are important. If anyone doesn't know what a layer is, definitely hit me up.
We use layers a lot here on Adobe
Yeah.
Live.
Yes, which is good. I love it. All right, so I'm feeling pretty good about her face in terms of the actual skin tone. Now I'm going to come down to other areas because a lot of people forget that there's still the rest of the body attached.
Right. You mean they focus so much on the face?
Yeah, and then they
leave
kind of
the attention
leave
to
things.
detail.
I've
sort of
seen
thing?
some hilarious Photoshop fails where people have just forgotten that the face. Sorry, that they've forgotten about other areas. So they've left
Right.
a bulldog clip in the side of an image. I think.
Right.
A major fashion company, I'm talking like international, was Burberry level. It wasn't Burberry, but it was Burberry level.
Okay.
They released a campaign recently where the retoucher had just left in the bulldog clips. And I was
Wow.
like,
This is something like pinning back the clothes. like pinning
yeah,
back
it
the
holds
top or
everything back,
something?
yeah. And it's so easy to get rid of, and it was a very clean like the background was so clean that you could
Right.
have easily just pulled it out using this patch tool that I'm using now. And they just forgot.
Oops.
I was like, oopsie daisy, someone got fired. So in order to do this, because this is quite a strong line and it's not necessarily just a slight imperfection in terms of the colour and the tone, what I'm going to do is I'm using the patch tool and I'm pulling all of that area and I'm pushing it into a clean source point and then it blends the two for me. So I tend to do this quite a fair bit. You can also do it with other little tools in here. I like the, what's it called? Should know this, healing brush tool. Don't really like the spot healing brush tool because it tends to guess for you and it doesn't always get it right.
Right.
And even you yourself, there'll be times that I'll do something with the patch tool and I was like, that wasn't right. I should have picked a cleaner source point or a better area to actually draw it from. But yeah, so you can use the healing brush tool. I don't recommend the spot healing brush tool. In terms of speed, the patch tool is the best. It's not necessarily the most precise, but for today, it's working a treat.
Quick.
So you can see that the lines are gone, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to pick another clean little source point from down here, and I'm going to brush that highlight back in a little bit, and then I'll also do that again with all the shadows and whatnot from down here. So I'll just keep working in here.
Cool.
Like so.
Question from chat. Yes, it is an Australian accent.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You could be
Everyone
asking
gets
either
so
of us, but-
confused. But particularly because I've travelled so much, but not because I've picked up on other people's accents. It's just when I am overseas, people are like, "Oh, you're British." I'm like, "What?"
My wife gets that all the time.
I'm like, "Thanks for the compliment," but
I think it might be
no.
because you just enunciate very clearly.
Oh, good.
That could be it.
Okay, hopefully that's it. So I find it annoying that I enunciate so much. sometimes I'm like, was that I can make a sound? Like, did I just really make that sound?
Do you guys notice that? I didn't notice that.
Sometimes I'll do. Like, you might pick up on it. Apologies. Okay, so creating a bit more in terms of the actual like tone and texture in here as well. There's a reflection, so I can't quite 100% see what I'm doing. Another good thing when you are retouching, go to a dark room. It's depressing,
right?
But it just means that you can really see what you're doing in the actual colours and the light. So now that I'm looking at our screen, which has Mini down the bottom, I can kind of see a little bit more as well, like where I've overdone it here.
Right.
So I'm just going to...
We could turn the studio lights off, but then the audience might not...
wouldn't be able to see my beautiful face. And we got to make sure you guys see how pretty I am. All right, cool. So if I turn back on my texture, sweet. It's a little bit smoother, a little bit cleaner, a little bit bright down here. So I'm going to pretend that I didn't do that. And I'm just going to use a source point where it's a lot darker down here. I'm just going to brush back over there. And you can see already it looks a lot better.
Festus has a great question,
yes.
Which is why we missed you so much. Did it take much practice to learn when not to patch out a wrinkle or some such? So like removing too many wrinkles start looking a bit weird. Yeah, so I guess it's a question that I've had as well, is how to find that balance of overdoing it.
Yeah, 100%. That's also the thing. So when I retouch, I want it to make it look like I haven't touched it.
Right.
I want it to look like, the idea is just to bring her back to what she looks like. And because I find, obviously, photos can really pick up on a lot, and a lot that you wouldn't even look at in day-to-day life. And so when I'm retouching, I try and just make it look as though the image is her and what you would perceive her as in day-to-day life. So in terms of wrinkles, I would be leaving these areas. I want to leave all of this.
Right.
I try not to remove any sort of like smile lines, like say down in here. Some people have what we would call jowls. So like I would try and soften those, particularly if it's an image that's lit from above. The jowls tend to be a little bit more noticeable.
Right.
And that's not how that person actually looks. It's just lighting. Like everyone can look quite different in different lighting. So, I could look gorgeous in this light, and then, I could go to somewhere else and you'd be like, it's not very nice. Like, up light, down light, none of that's actually attractive.
Yeah,
so
right.
I'm going to keep all of this around her eyes, because if you kind of get into that, it really just looks creepy.
Yeah.
Like I've seen some dodgy jobs, and I know I've done some dodgy jobs too, like way back in the day. And I'd like to say way back in the day, but it's probably like 2 weeks ago that I was like, here's a great image. And everyone's like, it's not.
Well, we all get a little bit better.
Yeah. And the good thing is
right?
you do, if you do say go too far and you're like, I needed to keep that wrinkle in there and I should have, you can always mask it back in. So I'll show you a little bit about masking in, not too long. But yeah, I tend to try and keep all this in here just because it's really a part of her and it gives her face a bit more character too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, good question. I hope that answered it, Yeah, don't want it to look too airbrushed. And that's also the beauty as well of frequency separation, because it doesn't just airbrush over the skin. It actually keeps the texture still there. So that's why I use this format. It also really, really works well in film, which I actually might just quickly show you guys a real quick example.
Cool.
So say if you're
shooting in film.
Yeah, if you're shooting in film,
Right.
a lot of people shoot in film because they want to have that beautiful grainy effect. So if I open it in Photoshop, should open up in Camera Raw real quick. Just pretend that I've worked on it. Yep, cool.
It's a very nice shot.
Thank you. It's got some great light leaks. I have a little Ricoh that just has the best light leaks that are just... Most people are like, wow, I wish I could duplicate that. And I'm like, well, you can't, because it's my Ricoh and it's actually how it turns up. So the idea with frequency separation is I would be able to keep this grain all up in here in this image, but still be able to work on the tone of her skin. And it wouldn't be brushing over the top of the grain. It keeps it intact and it actually keeps the integrity of the image there.
Right.
So you're not just paint brushing as if you were actually using paint. So that's essentially why I do frequency separation, because it means that you can separate the two and actually work on the different layers. It's very important because, you'll see images and be like, what have they done? And I do that too, I'm guilty of it.
Was that a personal project? Is that why you were able to shoot it in film? Or
No,
do you
it wasn't.
sometimes get
No,
to
that was
use...
actually a paid one. That was for Chin Chin, Swim and Motor Operandi. So Motor Operandi is an e-commerce site. Chin Chin Swim is a new label in Bali. And we went out to this amazing house in the middle of Tabanan, which is not typical Bali. It's a bit further out, and it's kind of shaped a bit like a cloud. And we had a couple of hours there and just shot. A lot of people are really good. They let me kind of do what I want, and if I say let's shoot film, they'll be like, cool, we'll shoot film.
Nice.
Yeah, I've gotten to that stage where I'm like, you should definitely shoot film. Like, you should definitely let me do it. It's going to be great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I like it.
So I'm going to move back to the texture layer real quick, and I'll explain what I'm doing here. So I'm pretty happy with skin tone overall. It's pretty good. Like, down here is not, don't really need to focus on that for today, I think. Just keep it up here. But I'm pretty happy with this. I will come back through and darken this a little bit more, but after I've done my texture. So I've turned my texture layer back on, and I'm literally just going to pick major sort of points here that aren't necessarily always on her face. So say, for example, food, or there's been like a little stuff up with makeup. And what I'm using is this little patch tool again. But it's very important that, particularly because there is so much texture here, and I don't want to lose it, I'm going to pick source points that are very close by and still very similar. And you can see attempting to blend here. So because I'm going to be zooming back out, you're not going to be seeing it on that level. But when I am quite close in, sometimes you can see exactly where you've been. So here is just like a little bit of hair, and I'm literally just going to pull that, keep the tone and the texture the same, and then I'm just releasing it. And you can see that, that's disappearing. It's harder on curves, like on the corner of her face there. But yeah, okay, good. I was like, let's see what I'm doing. But you can see that I'm just doing little adjustments every little piece as I go, just to try and ensure that, her face is looking the way it should, or the way it is in real life.
We have a question, two questions actually. A question from Jamie. Would you use that technique in other images, not just portraits, like food photography? Definitely,
because it still keeps it all there. So say, for example, you have an image with a little bit of grain in it and you want to keep the grain. Say there's like a piece of food that's come off the plate in a spot that it shouldn't have. I would do that. And it is a longer process, but you can also set up an action to actually do it for you.
Right.
So you can, if say, for example, they're similar images and you just want them to all kind of have like, so when I did it with the Gaussian blur, say you want the Gaussian blur just to all be set at like 6.0, you can just do it as a quick action. So you just open up Photoshop, press play, and it does it for you. And then you've got all your layers set there, ready to go.
Do you use a lot of actions?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's a whole nother live stream, I think. Yeah.
We can do another live stream on that. You guys can get me back to Sydney and I'll do it.
And Festus was asking, did some of the gold glitter eyeshadow get on her cheeks a bit? It looks pretty shiny, those bits that you were patching in.
Yes, yeah. Gold glitter got... I know that Maya actually purposely put some as well on her chest just to highlight that. And because I shot with such a shallow depth of field, you can see beautiful little flecks just up in here, which I actually love. It's almost like a little bit of... I never knew how to pronounce it, but like bokeh? Bokeh? Someone help me out here.
Wow. Chat's going to help us out with the pronunciation. They're just going to spell it out.
Yeah, I know. But like, am I saying it right? Bokeh.
I'm the wrong person to ask.
It was a big Flickr term. Everyone in Flickr back in the day loved it.
Right.
They were all like, it's essentially like the circles of light that you see in a low resolution image. Oh, not low, in a low aperture.
Right.
Sorry, I've also got a hair in my mouth. Wow, real classy on
glitter
today. Did that one, hopefully that hurt. Yeah, cool. And so I'll also try and get some of the glitter out of just like her hair in here. So I'm really gonna zoom in just to show you guys. But I'll come through and thankfully that glitter sits in the texture layer in this. Sometimes, okay, thanks. Thanks, David.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Perfect. I love that when people type on the internet, it's pronounced.
Yeah, and I'm like, that seems about right. We'll just run with it.
Yep.
So sometimes some areas in the image, some things will actually sit in the texture layer and not in the skin tone.
Right.
So normally if I can just turn that off, you can see it's not sitting in the skin tone. Sometimes like I'll be there for ages working on an area and I'll be like, why isn't it? And I'll turn off the texture layer, I'll be like, because it was sitting in the other layer.
Right.
That's why. So it's good to always kind of turn them on and off and just see, and then work from it that way. So I'm going to do a quick overall scan. What have we got here? I might just pull some of these points across here. Beautiful. I also talk to myself a lot when I'm retouching. Friends will like walk past and be like, you talking to me.
You kind of have to when you work by yourself.
Yeah, it's true.
Do you have any pets?
I do. I have, well, they're not mine, but I treat them like they're my own.
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 rescue dogs and a little rescue cat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so in Bali, there's obviously
Lot of
quite a
dogs.
few animals.
Mm-hmm.
We have one dog with 3 legs named Lewis. He's a big champion. He's a real Bali dog. Like, you think he's like a Kintamani mix or something, which is a pretty strong dog. His leg must have been broken and then reset horribly, so he kind of had a bit of a bent leg.
Poor little buddy.
And then we have a little Chihuahua renamed to Crumpet. She has one eye. She lost it to a cobra, the other one.
Wow.
She survived a cobra.
Did you used to
attack.
have a pet cobra and then it got...
No. Yeah, we totally had a pet cobra. Oh, man. I actually don't mind snakes. So I hate spiders, but if you give me a snake, I'll be like, all right, cool, we're running with this now.
Wow. And there's a third dog.
Third dog, his name is Boogie. He belongs to a friend of ours that no longer lives in Bali, but because flying them in and out of Bali is too difficult in terms of the immigration costs,
Right.
she's currently saving and will hopefully get Boogie across to Melbourne where she'll eventually be.
Right.
So yeah, he's a pug, and he's very special. He's very, very special.
And the cat?
And the cat's name is Sushi. She's...
That's my friend's cat's name.
Really?
We sat for like 2 years. Sushi the cat. Yes.
yeah,
We're
we
sharing
love
photos
Sushi.
afterwards.
Okay, cool.
Amazing.
Sushi was found by my housemate Inika on Christmas Day. So she was like, Christmas present. And he's so cute. He's he's like not the most agile. So like he'll think that he can do something and then he'll just drop and you're like, no.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, he's sweet though. He's intelligent. They're all mostly intelligent except maybe not Boogie. But yeah, they also all love to sit with me and retouch, particularly Crumpet. Like she'll always be like, give me attention. And I'll
Right.
be like, I'm here. And she'll put her paw out and be like, hey.
How helpful.
I know. It's my assistant, my editing
But it gives you
assistant.
someone to talk to. It's either that or plants.
True. And I do talk to them a
Right.
lot. I do have plants too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hannah was asking, is that your necklace in the photo?
It is. She wanted to wear my necklace.
Nice.
She was like, can I start wearing your necklaces? That actually happens really frequently. I'll be shooting with someone and they'll be like, oh, I love your necklaces. I'll be like, do you want to wear it? And they're like,
Do you wear it intentionally? So like I'll just wear props?
no, I just always wear this stuff. Like I
Right.
never take them off, which is weird. Even like going through, airport security and I'll be like, oh, should have removed that because they're just like, what has she got? It's necklaces, like a lot of necklaces. But yeah, so that is my necklace. Yes, Hannah.
Good question. And why do you prefer the patch tool over healing or spot healing? Question from our friend.
This stage, because it's a bit faster and it means that I can work on larger areas, I can also choose the area that I work on. So I can go quite small with it. And the benefit of working with this device, I've got a pen, which means I can really get in there. If I was on a trackpad, it's a bit more clunky and I'd be like, trying to pull it across. See, I'm not even good on a trackpad. Don't even put me near one. It's just not ideal. But yeah, so in this sort of instance, I can actually get in really tight or I can, choose a really large area and be like, yeah, but I'm going to just Command Z that or Control Z that because I really didn't want to do that. So yeah, that's essentially why. From here, I'm actually going to go back to the skin tone really quickly and I'm just going to paint a little bit with a darker colour. I'm going to bring my flow down to say like 3%. And I'm just going to paint back over the highlight that's quite strong. And then down here too. Cool. So I'm feeling pretty good about that right now. She's not looking too touched, but she's at least looking like there's a big difference.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like you can really push it too far. It's
Without
really...
the before and after, it's quite, but it doesn't see.
No,
like, as
you
were
just are
saying.
like, oh, it looks nice. It doesn't look like she's being too touched. Just looks like she's real damn flawless, which is the idea. So after this, I'm going to, and again, duplicate your layer, but I'm actually, because this texture layer and this skin tone layer, the texture is not an actual solid layer. So I need to merge all visible layers and create a new one on top. So to do that, I'm going Control, I think I go Control,
We're going to try this for the first time.
Yeah, Control Shift Alt E. That's what I do. I don't know if that's actually correct, but it creates a whole new solid layer.
Then we discovered there's like an extra.
I think I was adding in Alt that didn't need to be there.
Right.
But it still works. So
It's just an ode to whatever works. You just don't want to mess with it ever.
I know. That's what my muscle memory goes
Totally.
to that. So I'm running with that too. So from here, I would either do a bit of a dodge and burn as well. So I'd like create a layer that's for dodging and burning. And that would just mean that I would come in and really like draw some of those shadows back in. So I'm going to go to the dodging tool. If her teeth were visible, I'd whiten them just a touch. You can also still do this in the skin tone and the texture, but it's, it's not necessarily like needing to happen there. I try and just keep it more about the skin and less about other areas or elements in the image, say like, the shadowing or the highlights. Like I'll paint some back in, but I can also do it again in the dodging. So with my dodge tool selection, I've got in the shadows, because it's quite dark in here, I'm actually just going to like lighten the whites of her eyes just a touch. Don't go crazy with that because people can look pretty intense. Like I've seen some people go a little crazy with it and like, see when I zoom out, like she doesn't look too scary, but you can really like, I've seen people do it with editing the, whitening the teeth. Yeah. And in real life and also. Yeah. You're like, that's not right. like that's just not right. A little bit too much. Yeah. So I'm just brightening up the whites of her eyes a little bit to make her look a little fresher. Question from chat. Do people that you're taking photos of ever mind, like that doesn't look like me? It's a pretty interesting question. Yeah. I mean, these are models, but. Yeah. If I am altering someone's face like a fair bit, if I'm liquefying, majority of the time is at the request of them. Right. People give me retouching notes, particularly if I'm shooting a portrait of someone else. They'll be like, can you make me look like this? Right, so many people will be like, make me look like Miranda Kerr. Like, yeah, right. Do you have a Miranda Kerr filtered button? Yeah. Like, I've like jokingly we should build one. I've literally put some like Miranda Kerr's face on someone else's body once as a joke and was like, is this what you meant? Right. And they were awesome. Just like, thank you, you're hilarious. No, but I think in this instance, it's really just putting her back to what she looked like. Like if she has, say for example, like a mole or a marking birthmark, I'd leave it. Sometimes even accentuate it, particularly if someone has like stretch marks. If the brand is cool and on board, then they'll be like, please leave them, or even like highlight them. Right. I'll be like, cool, great. And that's what come in. I'll even dodge them to like bring them up and really like, point out. Because some people like, I love stretch marks, and like some people will be, brands particularly now are thankfully like, we don't want you to really touch areas that are actually there. It's just small little things like say the glitter on her face or a little like mark from makeup that's not quite blended. So that tends to be what I get to focus on these days. Some brands will be like, retouch it like crazy. I'll be like, okay. Right. If I have to. But yeah, no one has ever come back being like, that doesn't look like me. They're just like, oh, I look gorgeous. I'm like, yeah, you are gorgeous. So, yeah. I like it. Yeah, thankfully no one's ever been mad, but look, I've only been doing this 9 years. Could happen one day. I've just noticed a spot that I'm not happy with. Cool. So, say I've also come in, I'm going to do a bit of a burn real quick. Just down here. So it kind of just accentuates the shadows. So I'm just going to darken in here. It's in the midtones right now. I don't have it in the shadows just because there's not necessarily a crazy amount of shadowing. I'll also sometimes, depending on the model, I'll sometimes... Like I don't need to in this instance because Diana's got beautiful dark eyebrows, but I'll sometimes burn the eyebrows a little bit. Right. It's a really weird sentence. Burn the eyebrows. Burn the eyebrows. But I'll also potentially do it like in strokes, so it looks like the eyebrow itself. Right. So it looks like the the hairs with like individual hairs. The eyebrows not come up as much in photography or the lighting? Or some people tend to really want like strong eyebrows now. It's like quite fashionable to have a really strong, solid eyebrow. You don't want it to look like they're two caterpillars on the face, separate entities. Right. But you do want them to kind of... crawling away from each other. I think I used to do that with my makeup not that long ago. Right. You look back on photos, you're like, that's embarrassing. That wasn't even a photo. That's just, it wasn't retouched. It's just my face. But yeah, so I'll sometimes do that. And sometimes I'll also go in and paint individually onto the mascara, onto the eyelashes and do that there too. So let's just say, cool, let's do a little before and after as you can see thus far. Now you can see with my burn, I've gone onto the background. And this is where I get to show you how to mask. So essentially, I've cooked it, I've gone too far. This is where I get to paint back into my mask here. I'm going to paint it black because I want to be masking it out. And I need to switch back to my brush tool, so selecting B. And I'm bringing my flow all the way back up so that it's actually a strong brush. It's not like I have to sit here for hours just like going back in.
And is that for our benefit, or is that what you would do?
Oh, no, that's what I would do.
That's what you would do.
Because this is not necessarily painting anything in particular. I'm just trying to show that I made a boo-boo and that I'm trying to fix it. So this is on the dodge and burn layer. I'm now masking out the spot where I accidentally got onto that yellow background there. So you can see, cool. You can see it's not making a difference when I turn it off and on in the actual layer here. That layer going on and off, it's not in the yellow where it was initially. If I were to, can't remember which button it is to turn off the layer. I mean the mask. Anyway, you don't need to know about that. But yeah, so I've made that mistake. Now because there has this layer has a mask on it, I can't just go Control J because it would still copy the mask again. So I'm just going to delete that, and I'm making a whole new layer on top by merging visible and creating a new layer. And this is where I would also do something in my retouching process where I try and highlight certain areas. So I'll sharpen an area, but I'll use an overall sharpen and I'll mask the area back in.
Right.
So I'll use a mask to block it out and then draw it back in. So this is a sharpening, but it's not an overall sharpen. So I'm going to go to Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen. And I'm just going to click on her eye here. Yep, cool, I like that. I normally keep between a range of 100% and 150%. So just do this, and this is where it normally would take me 10 years, and I'd just be sitting here and I'd be like, just leave, go make a cup of tea, come back.
Right.
Thankfully with this device, it's not happening. It's a lot faster.
Super quick.
But you can see when I zoom in that it's quite different, and it's really drawing out all of the texture in the skin. So I mask it out by painting it black with my paint bucket tool. So now the layer's essentially turned off, it's not there. And with my brush still set at quite a high flow, say almost 100%, I would switch it to white. Just gonna bring the size of the brush down, and then I'm gonna paint back in that detail. So that gold eyeshadow, which we really wanna focus on. And it's essentially another way of dodging and really bringing focus to an area in the image without actually, altering it and dodging it. It just kind of brings your eye to there first. So you're looking at her lips and you're looking at her eyes and the gold eyeshadow, and you're like, oh, nice. Well done, Maya. Great makeup job. Just highlighting her amazing skills and Diana's amazing eyes.
It's a team effort, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Festus was saying that he used to do dodge and burning old school in the dark room.
Oh,
Went through
yes,
a ton of
yeah.
Have you done that before?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
that was part of, and yeah, you can't undo anything. That's it. You've done it, and that's yeah. I used to do that at SCA. We had the ability to develop our own film, and then also just to go to town. You could enlarge and also do dodge and burn, and then you could also scan your own stuff. And that was essentially what I did in university. It was just hours and days spent developing film.
Right.
People be like, don't you have assignments to do? I'd be like, yeah, after I develop all this film for free. Yeah, that's where all my course money, at least I feel I got it. Yeah, I got that money back somehow.
I did a lot of free printing.
Yeah,
CMYK proper printer to do a lot of stuff. Yeah,
yeah, definitely have done.
Sorry, St George TAFE.
Where's St George TAFE?
Cogra.
Oh, Cogra. Mm-hmm. Did not know. Oh, it's
down,
I know that.
The coast.
I actually had a friend who did graphic design there.
Oh, cool. I might know them. We'll play the Do You Know This Person game after this.
Does your sushi know my sushi? Does
Could be the same cat.
Could be. That's how sushi just turned up on Christmas Day. Cool. So I've done that layer. I've masked everything else out except for her eyes and just the tip of her nose and those beautiful glossy lips. And now what I have to do, because again, it has a mask on it, I have to merge all visible and create a new layer on top. So using my shortcut, which is probably not correct, Control-Shift-Alt-E. And from here, I might potentially liquefy. I don't really need to liquefy this image. There's nothing that's really going on in here, but I'm just going to show you guys what I would do in the instance of liquefying, because, I've got to give you guys a full run here. And as you can see, we're kind of getting near the end of the image itself in terms of me playing with the skin and sort of the highlights and whatnot. So this is kind of where I'd be like, I'm pretty happy with it. I'll do one final pass and double check that I'm, really stoked on it. But this is kind of where I get to be a little bit more manipulative with, the image in terms of the color and the tone and all of that sort of stuff. So in Liquify, there's a really cool tool, which I think is new, but it probably isn't. This is another little masking tool. So essentially they call it like freeze mask or something. Yeah, freeze mask. And if you have an image that has a lot of like information happening on the outside, so like say here and here or in the background, particularly anything that's like linear, and you do not, because obviously something that's linear, it's a dead giveaway if you start liquefying and those linear objects start pulling in towards or, expanding, et cetera, et cetera. It's like quite a funny thing when you see an image that's not been done properly. So this essentially means that you can mask out, say I didn't want to move her necklace, I wanted to keep it where it was, but I wanted to be able to like say elongate the neck. I would paint over the necklace in red. And I actually might just come in here. This is a slower tool just because it takes up a lot of info. So this is something that you need to like be prepared to spend a bit more time on. I'm now selecting the erase because I've gone a bit too far. Again, making boo-boos just in this area. This area seems to be difficult for me for some reason. Cool. And then if I zoom back out very slowly. Oh, my tool's having a bit of a wig out, which it sometimes does.
Can do that.
Yeah, it is a slightly more, because there's so much more information that's being, processed here. This is like
it pulls it out as a separate thing.
Yeah, but then I'd go back to my Liquify, and then this is something I actually do use the trackpad with, because otherwise I can go real gung-ho and just be like, look, with this, I've sometimes given people no necks. It's not ideal. Actually, there's a slight bump on her neck just here, really, really small. I'm going to fix that. Might just be a muscle that's sitting a little bit further out than usual, just ever so gently. And that's the thing, I'm a huge perfectionist.
That is very subtle.
But I look at it and I see it and I'm like, that needs to... And overall, it can make such a big difference in the image. Like, at least to me. Maybe not to no one else, but...
But it's those small changes that are the difference between like a good and a great kind of project, that
and
attention
that's like
to
the
detail.
thing. That's probably why people, I think, hire me, because they're like, you're nuts. Like, you're a little bit crazy in terms of how intense you're willing to go on an image, because you just want it to look perfect. So fake little one here, you can see if I like pull, you can see that it's masked out. I forgot to get some of that yellow in here. But yeah, like it sits where it was sitting. You can see that mask actually working and occurring. Obviously, she's not going to look like that, so I'm just going to click cancel. So we're not using the Liquify layer today because she is gorgeous and I don't really need to. Her face and, everything sitting where it should. She's just...
How often would you use the Liquify, do you think? I mean, it's obviously case by case, but does it come up very often? Or?
No, not really. It's only if someone, say, for example, like if you've got your arm and you've got it pressed in and like it's sitting out, or there's a muscle that's really bulging in one spot, or maybe even perspective in an image, if someone's like leaning forward and they're looking a lot like heavier up here than they are there, I'll do it only if it looks alien already. Like if they don't look quite right. Because again, a 35mm lens can distort a person. So lenses aren't necessarily, like the most true to life lens is a 50mm, and that's what you see minus your peripheral. And not everyone shoots 50mm. So this is a way of kind of like bringing things in. But I've never really had to use Liquify for anything drastic.
Right.
Although I do love, actually no, I did use it once for something drastic. It was my favorite. I love drastic jobs, which are really weird. One in particular, I had to lengthen someone's leg, but she was wearing a cowboy boot. And so there was detail in the cowboy boot, and it was like a long cowboy boot. And so I had to like pull it down just because of the way her leg was angled. It looked too short. So I did use Liquify, but I also then like created some of that. Like it's, for me, it's like retouching can be quite a problem solving thing, which I like.
Right. I
like a little bit of maths, a little bit nerdy. So like I found a way of, transforming and using the warp tool, free transform tool, and then warping the boot to make it look perfectly. Because when you liquefy, you're pulling the pixels and you're pushing
you're kind of stretching.
Yeah, you're stretching them. So it doesn't always look good. So I had to like copy and paste and free transform, and that was a fun one. But that's probably the most extreme, and it's not common.
Not common.
Yeah. So say for example, I'm like, cool, love what she's looking like. She looks gorge. I'm going to come into the adjustment layers, and this is where I would then sort of finish up the image. actually, before I do that, I lied. It's not where I'd finish up the image. I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm actually just going to add a bit of grain just because I do love the film look.
Right.
And this is something that, like, not all clients want, but I always try and convince them. So I do love to try and give the image a bit of grain, and this is also, like, I think this is probably a big no-no in retouching. I think a lot of people will be like, oh, what are you doing? Like, you're degrading the image by adding grain. But I'm going to do it because it's my image. So as you can see, this is a lot of grain. In the preview, if I zoom in, you can see it's made the whole image look dirty. That's essentially what grain can be. If you shoot an image with really high ISO, it tends to make it look grainy and also dirty. That's what I describe it as. I don't know what.
I used to do that a lot, unintentionally.
Yeah, you'd be like, this looks great. And then you zoom in real close. You're like, wow, those colours are muddy and they're not crisp. Yeah, that's what shooting with a high ISO will do, guys. So try to avoid it. So I'm actually just going to pull the grain down, and again, holding down shift because it gets me there faster. Just dropping all those points. So I think I want to you can see it more in the background here. So maybe if I just go 1.1.
This might be hard for you guys to see at home.
Yeah, depending on your screens. But it kind of also, it's just an aesthetic that I like. So not everyone needs to do it, but it's just what I do. So I'm showing you guys my process. And then from here, this is when I would actually do, adjustments for, say, you can warm up the image in here by doing this in filter. Some people also kind of pull a lot of the color out with photo filter by actually creating a brown, and it actually desaturates the image a little bit, but it also keeps a lot of the tone in there. So photo filter can kind of keep in that highlight and, those beautiful little dots on the lips, but it actually desaturates the image a little. That's not necessarily the vibe I'm going for here. I'm mostly just going to play with curves, which you were shocked by.
Well, no, not shocked. Just like to guess when someone's coming on whether they're levels or curves.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. What's the majority? Like most people?
I think these days curves.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean,
based
malleable.
on who we've had here.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends and people that I know are designers, and we were all taught levels. Well, most of the ones that I know.
Yeah.
And I think it's just one of those things. As we're talking about your shortcuts and things like that, the habits that you have, what works for you to get the result that you want. We tend not to want to change those things.
We're very stuck in our ways.
We are, aren't we?
Yeah. But I'm
for creative people, you think we'd
as well. Like,
try new things more often.
Stubborn.
Yeah.
Yeah. The guy that I'm seeing is like, you are stubborn. I was like, yeah, I am. I'm like, really? And I get stuck in there, and I'm just like, I'm just going to keep. This works for me. I'm just going to keep running with it.
That's right.
Yeah. So this is all obviously personal preference, but like, say for example, I want to pull down those shadows, but I also just want to lift where they actually sit. So you can really, get a bit more into it. It really depends. I also, most of the time, I'll make an adjustment layer and then I'll be like, that's intense, I need to pull it back. So I'll, drop the fill. You can already see that it's really pushed that actual shadows in it. Not necessarily messed with the highlights too much. It's brought them up a little, but not a lot. So in this scenario, this is how I get it looking the way I want it to. I'll just pull that fill back down and just kind of, okay, cool. And this is me talking to myself. I'll be like,
yeah, cool.
That looks nice.
Come on, Nicole.
That's beautiful. Well done.
You deserve a break.
Yeah. Have a Kit Kat. And then, of course, with colours, I would use selective colour. Sometimes I play with the colours in curves. It's mostly if I'm essentially like cross-processing the image and pulling, much more extremes, which not many people do anymore. It was pretty popular when Flickr was around, but Flickr is still around. Sorry, Flickr, but like it was popular back then, like the Tumblr days of all of that. So sometimes if I'm looking at an image and I can't actually like decipher what is what, because obviously you've got a pretty stock standard list of colours, and this image is made up of more than that. There's a lot more in it. So if I need to actually find what colour I'm working with, I also open up an adjustment layer of hue and saturation, and I use this tool, which is like a little eyedropper tool. I click on it and it shows me, okay, that's the yellows, not in the reds. So then I come back to my selective colour and I go, all right, well, I want to play with the yellows. I want to add, say, like a little bit more cyan. I want to give it a bit of a darker tone, or I want to warm it up more. And that allows me to then differentiate and pick where it is.
Right.
Because not everyone knows straight off the bat. You don't look at it and go, oh yeah, that's like the yellows or the reds. So yeah, I would this is like my little cheat, so you're welcome. I'm just going to get rid of that layer now because I don't need it, and I'm just working on selective colour. I might actually darken some of the yellows, so if we I should do this on a larger scale. I tend to get in quite a fair bit. So coming down this way like makes it really like soft and light, as if none of the yellows were there, but I really enjoy that background. Oh, I've just lost my shift. My shift's not working. There it is. Thank you. Cool. So it's given it a bit of a like darker tone in like the actual yellows themselves, and also kind of pushes the golds as well, which I like. But yeah, I'm just trying to think of any other adjustments that I would make. This is also where I would turn the image black and white if I wanted to.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily like play with the selective color. I'd just go straight to black and white. And then from there, you're also able to like manipulate the image so that certain things are lighter. So you could really push the background if you wanted to, or you could pull it down even further. And this is also where you want to try and like draw out the highlights. So.
And for those in chat that weren't, and anyone watching that wasn't here, caught the beginning, you will, even if the end result is to be black and white, this is the step that you would do it. So.
I would do it here. I wouldn't start with black and white just because it tends to really lose a lot of information in the most basic way of saying it. It's really like, it's like, it's a lot harder, to be honest.
Right.
I've done it. It's not easy. And it ended up on product packaging that's like stuck in David Jones, and I hate that image, and I'm always like,
oh no.
I'm like, oh,
so you saw it in the wild.
Yeah, I've seen it many times in the wild. It's like a beauty product as well, so it was a beauty shot, and I was given the image in black and white, and I was like, can I get the raw? Can I get the raw? Can I get the raw? And they were like, sorry, no, we only have this.
I was going to ask, so is this someone else's photography as well?
Yes, yeah. It wasn't my photography.
Right.
And the model had zero hair and makeup, which is fine, but there was not a lot of clean source points to work from.
Right.
That's also why people tend to do hair and makeup, even if it's meant to look really natural. It's just good to have something to start with, and it just kind of gives me, a little bit. Also, the poor thing was like battling the elements. It was freezing cold that day, and it was shot at like 5 a.m.
Right.
So I was just like, I'm really...
So there's a lot of variables that weren't
This is
like,
also, that was a job where like I would retouch it, and then I would hate it, and I would delete the whole thing and start again, which happens. Like, there's not always... There are days when you're on and you're off, and you're like, I did a really good job. Like, today I'm pretty pleased with this. But there'll be days when I'll be like, what are you doing? And if you start with a black and white image, it can really throw you off. So it's kind of nice to, you can always have the direction in mind and know where you're headed with it, which is always good to kind of have. And sometimes if you don't, you can always play around, but wouldn't really start in a black and white image because it's quite, it's not the easiest, particularly for a beauty image.
Right. Maybe
in fashion, but not so much beauty.
That's a good tip. Yeah, I haven't heard that before.
Yeah,
so.
Well, it just saves you a lot of hurt, hopefully. But yeah, and then I would save this image out for web, which is essentially what this one would be used for. And to do that, I would make sure it's a web-safe JPEG, which not everyone knows and not everyone does. We had a job for Vogue not that long ago, and for some weird reason, someone was like saving them out. It wasn't me in the line. Someone else was saving them out as just JPEGs, and they were being uploaded to Vogue, and the entire image, like the faces, everyone's face looked green. Like the pink was turning green, and so make sure.
And so do you mean like exporting as full web sRGB?
Yeah, sRGB.
Yeah, okay.
So to do that, I go. Maybe that's where the Alt comes in. I think it's Control Shift Alt S. Yes, it is.
That's 4. Yeah.
That's where
it's my favorite shortcut that I know. Actually.
Yeah. Oh, also my screen's a bit funny because we've changed the ratio.
Oh, right.
And I don't know if I'll be able to get out of this.
That might be our fault. Well, we've got some questions, which is great. So while we're doing that.
Yes.
Purple, I hope that's your real name. That's awesome. How have fashion trends changed over the years, affected your retouching process? We talked a little bit about this.
Massively, yeah. These days you highlight areas that most people would have wanted to hide back in the day.
Right.
And it's kind of nice because you're like, okay, cool. Like you retouch for the sake of looking like you haven't really retouched. And even sometimes people will be like, we have a job that you literally just need to do this one thing on. I'm like, great, cool. Like it's a little, not easier, because to make an image look like it's not being touched, it's actually a lot harder, but there'll literally be jobs where they'll be like, oh, there's something in the background, can you get rid of it? And that's it. And so like it's a trend to not even touch it.
Right.
So I'll just be like, all right, cool. I mean, it could technically put me out of a job, but hopefully not. Everyone hire me. My name's Nicole Cooper. Really good retoucher.
Instagram's just down there.
Yeah, at by Nicole
Slide into
Cooper.
those DMs.
Yeah,
available
seriously.
for travel.
But yeah, so it definitely changes. And there'll be times when like you look back on an image that you retouch and be like, what are those colours? Like, what did I do? Like, when did I think this is a good idea? Right now, people like pull contrast back quite a fair bit as well.
Right.
So like there's a big trend of like black and whites with really low contrast, or like a really perfectly exposed image but like with really like low contrast, or a flash with low contrast. So if you want to look fashionable, guys, there you go.
It's fashion, right?
Yeah.
It's going to constantly be changing, and we'll come back around.
Yeah.
Do you often get a reference when you're doing a shoot? Hey, we want something like this campaign, or we want photography like this certain photographer?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You'll get references. And even like with treatments, like colour treatments, sometimes people will be like, can we go down this avenue?
Wow, they get really into
there's a lot, like people will get very involved in the creative process, which is cool. That's fine, because it just means that it just is a job for me to, you know, pull inspiration and not copy, but be like, all right, I'm going to try and use these tones and these colours, and like, you know, the shadows will have a bit of blue in them, or the, you know, the highlights will be a little bit muted or soft. So yeah, people will kind of get involved. And then there are also clients that are like, we love you, we trust you, have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's more of a softer skill, but you obviously, for what you do and the way that you talk about it, you obviously have to talk to these people. So you have to talk the fashion speak and understand the trends and understand that sort of thing. You know, as opposed to
I'm fashion.
very fashionable. So like, how important do you think it is to be a photographer primarily working in a field that you're passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate that I fell into it, because I initially was in music and food, and then fortunately got my foot in the door and then got in there. But I think it's important, because then it also doesn't feel like a job.
Yeah.
And it helps, because I'm passionate about photography. I can nerd out on that all day long and talk about gear. And like, apparently my eyes just like, I go crazy, and I'm like, just keep talking about it all
We
the
didn't
time.
do the gear thing. Usually chat lights up about what did you shoot with and everything. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
It's fine, guys. No.
Cool.
But yeah, I think it's important, because it means that, you know, you love what you do, but it also means that you want to know more about it and you understand.
Yeah.
I've worked in not just photography, but I used to work for a fashion label when I was an intern, which was funny because I didn't do fashion design. I didn't know what I was doing, but they had me there doing photos for them and graphic design and all of those elements. But it meant that I saw the process from start to finish, and I was able to appreciate the process too. And it shows me what goes into like a label and that sort of stuff. And it also helps in terms of the imagery, because then you understand like the ethos of the brand and the actual direction they're headed in and what they're about. Because then it translates well into a photo as well, if you understand that.
Yeah, I feel like it'd be mandatory, to do a really good job.
There'll be clients that you don't know what the brand is until the day beforehand. You'll be like, okay, we're going to run with that. But it's always good to be able to kind of step into their shoes and be like, okay, pun intended, shoes, step into.
I love it. Fashion puns.
Yeah.
More of a technical question. Festus was asking, lens correction in Photoshop, have you ever used that? Yes, have you ever used that?
Have I ever used
lens correction?
We did at the beginning.
Yeah,
we did.
That's true.
It doesn't necessarily always bring it back to where you want it to, and sometimes it can really like elongate the forehead and make someone look brainy, but a little too brainy.
Right.
So you want to that's why occasionally you would step in and just use a bit of liquify, depending. But lens correction, I definitely recommend, even if you are using a 50mm, just because you want to pull the vignetting out. Unless that's the vibe you're going for, then you can pull it back in and draw it in. But it helps to kind of, that's one element in camera raw that you should never skip over.
Right.
Yeah.
Mandatory step.
Mandatory step.
I like it.
If you don't, I'm coming for you.
Chat's been great. Hope you guys have got a lot out of this one. I certainly have. There was a lot. Yeah, Festus was saying a lot to review on the replay. Yeah, I think that's true. I think you're very good at explaining, but you move very quickly, which is it's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's very natural to you, obviously. So just self shout out that this will be available on YouTube. It's usually up tomorrow.
Cool.
And you can check it out and you can pause it and try it out yourself, because there was some, especially at the end there, that last night at 10 minutes, there's a couple of really cool little tips in there. So. The wise will go back and check out some of those insider cool tips.
Yay.
I had a great time.
Cool, me too. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for coming on. We'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, cool. We got to do, what was the one we were going to do?
Actions.
Yeah, whole series on actions.
Whole series on actions. I love actions. They save our lives sometimes.
Yeah.
Hope you guys had fun. Thank you very much for joining. If you're on YouTube, you can subscribe to our channel, press the bell, and you'll be reminded every time we go live there and here on apaclive.com. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.